Pursuant to House Resolution 794, the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Iowa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment is an amendment that I've offered before in the past, and it simply says none of the funds made available by this act may be used to enforce Executive Order 13166. That's an executive order that was filed by then President Clinton on August 16th in the year 2000, in the last months of his presidency, that directs all federal fund recipients, and that would include federal contractors and state and local the federal government to facilitate language interpretation with anyone who seeks to engage with them. And that has been an executive order that's been highly costly, not only to the taxpayers but to the consumers in this country, and in time and in money. And it was one of the initial things that began to slow down this process of assimilation in America. And we know that a common language is the most powerful unifying force known throughout all of history, whether it's English or whether it's some other language in some other country. And that we have a strong effort to establish English as the official language of the United States. I happen to be the author of that accomplishment in the state of Iowa. 30 other states have English as the official language, and some 83% of Americans support this policy, and yet President Clinton's executive order subverts this and works to fracture us rather than unify us. So it'll save us billions of dollars. I didn't bring that figure to the floor with me, but we know it's been very expensive over time. We're 16 years into this, and it's been destructive to the unity of the American people. I want to see us united as a people, and this is one of the steps that we can take, and I would reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman reserved.
Chairman, I'd say first in response to the gentleman, and I respect his position and his background, but I'd say if he had a development in the Greek language, he might think of that pursuit of happiness as what our founding fathers did. They called it eudaimonia, E-U-D-A-M-O-N-I-A, the Greek word that means developing the whole human being, the body, the mind, the spirit, the soul, all together. That pursuit of happiness wasn't about a tailgate party. It was about becoming the best human being that you could. And that's a little difference in the translation of the language that got lost. And it's an example of how we're divided by language rather than unified by a common language. Another example would be Israel. They became a country in 1948. In 1950, they adopted Hebrew as their official language. I asked them why, and they said, because we saw the example of the United States, that you've embraced English as your common language. It's unified the people. We needed to have a language to unify the Israelis. And it's been successful, and I could give you examples. One day I got in a taxi cab, and there was a gentleman there, and he spoke perfect English, and he didn't seem to fit what a normal taxi cab driver was. And I said, where were you raised? He said, Bosnia. How long have you been here? 7 years. Did you learn English before you came? Not a word. How can you speak perfect English in 7 years? He said, it helps when you have to. And so I'm not about discouraging the utilization of other languages, and this amendment does not do that. What it says is I'm discouraged by the taxpayer dollars that are contributing to the division of America rather than let us have an encouragement to pull together in the same language. That's what this is about. It's a fiscally responsible amendment that addresses an 83% majority in 31 states that have already taken this act, and I urge its adoption, and I preserve the balance of my time. Mr. Chairman, say in response to the gentleman, I give some thought to the story of the Tower of Babel. And we know that the construction manager there was Nimrod, and he was building a tower to the heavens, and they had the arrogance to believe that they could bypass God and get to heaven without him. And the Lord looked down on the Tower of Babel, and he said, behold, they are one people. They speak all one language. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. And he scrambled their languages and scattered them to the four winds, and humanity on the planet has been at each other's throats ever since. That's the message of the Tower of Babel. My message is unify us as one people. It's not discouraging the utilization of other language, but it is discouraging the idea that we should establish ethnic enclaves in America, that we should isolate ourselves somehow in these neighborhoods and not be assimilating into the broader neighborhood. And I'll give an example to the gentleman. When Bush was president and we had a representative from the Department of Labor came to testify before the Small Business Committee, and she said, we have a problem. We don't have enough workers in the factories to run our punch presses and our lathes. Simple industrial. And why is that? She said, well, the applicants are not literate in the English language, and we have great difficulty in teaching them how to operate these machines. And I said, I can understand that if they're first-generation immigrants. In fact, I can understand it if some of them are second-generation. And she cut me off and said, even third-generation. The pickup of the language and the transition into the next generations is not happening at the speed it did because our enclaves are getting larger and more populated and people are more isolated into that. I want to encourage people to be successful, to go out and get an education, to assimilate more broadly. I want to be able to look across this country and know that I can walk into a city council meeting anywhere and know that it's being conducted in English. I want people to be able to talk and communicate with each other. And when I go to a foreign country and they speak their language, I get the sense of that too, that we gravitate towards common kind. And the more common we can be, the more things we can have common to each other, then the more likely we are to be bonded together. That is what this amendment is about. I urge its adoption, and I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.